Hello, and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 77, Singing Without Fear, with J.D. Frizzell. I'm going to be talking with J.D. As many of you might know, J.D.'s work. He is a high school choir director. He is a clinician. He is an innovator in classroom practices, as well as incorporating a cappella music into his classroom, as well as traditional choral work in everything that he does. And it's so interesting to hear him talk about how he approaches the job, as I enjoy talking with colleagues, fellow high school choir directors, about how we approach the job. And he's a standout in what he does, but it's very different approach than what I do. And so what a great way to just bounce ideas back and forth and finding so many things in common, and tons of things in this episode that I'm going to steal from what JD does. I found some awesome ideas that I'm going to take into the classroom this week. So one of the things that JD feels and believes, and we will discuss in this episode, is that we all want our ensembles to sing with passion, honesty, and expression. But how do we actually do it? And how do we measure if we're doing it? Well, group discussions, you can discuss the poetry, right? That's important. They're not going to create the same kind of transformative performances that will change the kids' lives. You have to dig deeper. And so when JD says we have to dig deeper, that's the conversation we're going to have today. What does that mean? Getting past the fear of what if something goes wrong with my voice is so important to whether or not the students, the singers, young people and old, can ever feel something when they perform. So stick around for this conversation. I think you're going to find it informative and insightful, and you're going to take some real practicable things out of this episode into your classroom. Before we get there, just a reminder that Sight Reading Factory is the tool, in my opinion, and I mean this honestly. I used Sight Reading Factory for years before the Choralosophy podcast even started. They were the first group I reached out to as a sponsor on this show because I believe so strongly in the product. So make sure you get yourself a membership and all of your students. And when you do, enter Choralosophy at checkout to save 10%. And unfortunately, we are headed back into a masked school year, which means that you're going to need the top of the line, most dependable, most comfortable, most flexible, and safest singer's mask out there. So go to mymusicfolders.com and get the resonance mask. They've lowered the price, and you can enter Choralosophy at checkout to save even more money for you and your program. And they also have different masks at different price points, not quite as flexible as the resonance mask, but you can check out all their masks there at various levels of price, and they're all very good quality. Then I will hit up one more little plug for you, which is that you're going to need some sheet music this school year. And that means Graphite Publishing and RyanMain.com. Graphite Publishing is a pretty expansive catalog, especially during the pandemic. They've added a lot of composers over there. So if you have not been to Graphite since before the dark COVID times, head over to graphitepublishing.com and check out all of the great choral music that they have that you can download, own the PDF, print it out for your choirs, and have it ready to go tomorrow. And RyanMain.com, Ryan's got some amazing music. He publishes his own stuff. And what's interesting about his website is once you get that PDF, you own it forever. So no limits on the number of prints that you do. You can print it this year and do it 5 years from now and print it again for free. Oh, well, you've already paid for it, right? You own that. So head over to RyanMain.com. At either of those sheet music vendors, you can use Choralosophy at checkout to get 10% off. And now here's J.D. Frizzell. All right, everybody, I'm here with Dr. J.D. Frizzell, and we are going to be talking today about ways that are effective and interesting and authentic to get our singers to drop the fear and just perform, which I think is one of the things that as choral directors we always struggle with. We want the kids to sing the right notes and the right rhythms and all that, but ultimately we know that that's not enough, and we have to get to the point where our kids are really singing from their hearts. So JD, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's good to be here.
So first, before we dive into the topic, let's make sure that everybody knows a little bit something about you. Tell us a little bit about your background, what got you to where you are today, and kind of the short version of your bio, if you would.
Sure. I did undergrad and master's at Southern Miss, and then I did my doctoral work at University of Kentucky. And I have just stayed where I am. I really like high school. And I've been at Briarcrest Christian School here outside of Memphis, Tennessee, first as the high school choir director, and now as the director of fine arts, now for 13 years. And this is where I am. In addition to my work at Briarcrest, I am the president of the Acapella Education Association and the founder of the National Acapella Convention.
Wow, awesome. That's great. So this is kind of a tangential question. You mentioned there that you were once just the choir director at the school and now director of fine arts. Does that mean you had to do less choir directing? How does that work for you in your position?
Yeah, so I'm half admin and half teaching, but the teaching is the part that I like the most. And when I started the program at the high school choir director, it wasn't as there wasn't as many students and we didn't have as many classes. And so, I was building the program. And then when I became fine arts director, I was like, yeah, I would love to do that and help grow the whole program, but I still want to teach. That's really important to me. And it was important to them too. So I feel like I get the best of both worlds. I get to have a broad impact on the greater fine arts community here, but I also get to still teach choir, which is my first love.
Right. So then, what does your day look like once school? Have you started school already?
We are on day 3.
Okay, so
feels like day 100, but
yeah, right. So with your half teaching, half admin, then what does your day look like?
I have a concert choir of about 45 students, which is unauditioned. And then I have an advanced women's choir, which is auditioned. And then I have my a cappella group, OneVoice, and that is auditioned. And then those are scattered throughout the school day. And then in the middle, I have a planning period for, my teaching, and then I'm doing admin work. So I'm observing classes of all fine arts teachers, and I'm working with them on budgets and helping plan productions and, fundraising activities and, all kinds of things.
Wow. That's very cool. Kind of unique for us in your structure there. So that's neat. So let's dive in here, because I came across a post that you made on Facebook where you were talking about a presentation that you kind of want to be able to give, and because you think it's an important topic. And this is the idea I mentioned as you signed in here, which is that we want our kids to be able to sing and express as their authentic self, but sometimes fear gets in the way. Because they want to be right, they want to sing it correctly or whatever, and so there's this inhibition, this balance, and so of course I immediately thought, well, if there's something that somebody wants to talk about passionately, I have a way for them to do that. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch for this presentation, and then we'll just start dissecting it.
Yeah, sure. So basically my pitch was, we do all want our choirs to sing with, with passion and honesty and expression. These are words we use all the time, right? But, how do we achieve those things in an objective, measurable way? We can discuss lyrics. We can, dive into the poetry and talk about the poet and talk about what it might mean to the singers. And that's great. I find that those kinds of discussions are often either very short or very surface level, or even if they are substantive, they are not usually then connected back in a way that impacts the music very much. And so this isn't the kind of like transformative performance that we're looking for. And we have to dive deeper as directors into ways that we can empower our singers to have the skills and the preparation to approach the music without fear. So fear of tessitura, fear of vocal faults, notes and rhythm accuracy. There are so many things, especially that our younger, less trained singers run into as we teach them. And so what I have found, I started learning this with my a cappella group. And in a cappella and contemporary a cappella, it's pop music. So it's more culturally native to the students, and they love that. And I found that they were singing with so much passion and energy and emotion. And I'm like, well, why can't we sing like Bach that way? And I'm like, well, yeah, there's so many other factors with this music that we're doing in choir. that makes it more foreign, not foreign in terms of like a country, but foreign in terms of culture.
Yeah.
And also, as I work with younger, less trained singers in my program, I realize that so many of them have issues with the music itself that is easily hidden within an ensemble rehearsal. They can basically fake it until they make it. And what's happening is you have leaders and then you have followers in a choir. And the leaders do enough leading that the followers go, okay, I can grab onto that and do like 30% of it. And we'll create a section sound that gets the notes and the rhythms right. And maybe even the articulations, the dynamics and the phrasing. And that ends up being what most above average scholastic choirs do. And with the better the voices, the higher the bar can be for what that musical product is. But I think back to like performances like the Aeolians at ACDA a couple of years ago. Were you there?
Yes.
And why that performance, people say it broke ACDA. Why did it break ACDA? I've listened back to that performance. It's not technically perfect, but it made every single person in the audience stand up. We all felt something really powerful about what they did. And we were all transformed by the performance that they made. And I was thinking to myself, what is it? Like, that was so good. And I've heard so many incredible choirs at ACDA. Why did they not make everyone feel that way? Where's the disconnect? And I come back to this idea that I watched them. So I listened to a recording and I was like, that doesn't translate like it did live. Where's the rub here? And then I watched a video. I was like, oh, I get it. They were singing with such confidence and expression and comfort within their own bodies and within the music that we were all able to take that journey with them. They weren't concerned at all about what the phrasing or the dynamics or the notes or where it was in their range or anything else. They were genuinely just performing. And I feel like even when I hear the best groups technically at an ACDA, they're basically showing us we can do all of these notes and rhythms and articulations and dynamics and vowels and blend and balance. Look how well we can execute these things. And it's an impressive show of execution, but it isn't a transformative, creative, artistic experience all of the time. And those are the moments that we as choir directors, those are the moments that get us hooked. Those are the moments that pulled us into the profession. Those are the moments that feed us and continue to push us as directors to do more and do better with our groups when you come back from performances like that. And so, that's really where the idea started, was this combination of working with the music that's more culturally native, that's pop, that more easily gets us to those emotional performances, and then an exemplar performance like that one that we a lot of us witnessed at ACDA.
Yeah. Now, I think that's important for us as choir directors and choir nerds and people who like choral music. We care about those types of expressive elements, but imagine what an audience member who is not well versed in our art form, how important that would be to them. So a good analogy to exactly what you were describing would be my knowledge level of the techniques and of the I guess the intricacies of the technical aspects of watching the floor routine in gymnastics at the Olympics, right? I don't have any frame of reference. I might watch some 15-year-old girl do this amazing routine, and because there's an artistic element to it, I'm watching and I'm cheering along for the girl who was expressive, who maybe was like pouring her heart out on the floor, and then I find out her score was lower than the girl from Russia or whoever was just like technically perfect, and maybe she was completely expressionless, right? And then afterwards we don't understand who won and like why did they win, right? So I think in choral music we have to remember that our audience members are also not well trained in all of the technical aspects, and we want to speak to them as well. They're not going to care if that G major chord was perfectly tuned and aligned and balanced at measure 32, and that's not what they're going to clap for. They're going to clap for a feeling that they have. And so getting our students to understand that is really important. So that brings me to, you say we've got to dive deeper beyond those groundwork laying activities like talking about text and all of those things, which are important. But what does deeper mean to you? So when you say dive deeper, give us some examples.
Sure. So a lot of times when I listen to choirs sing, and I find that I'm not fully connected, especially at like the middle and high school level, I'm watching the faces of the students, and I'm realizing so often that what they're navigating is still, they're still navigating technical barriers. And that is the first step. I remember my first year teaching, and the students like wanted to talk about what the song meant like 3 days into rehearsal. And I said, oh, we haven't earned that yet. Like we haven't even like begun to approach it. It'd be like reading a novel and you don't know what half the words mean. Like we can't even begin to analyze this book. We can't even read it yet. Like we have to learn the words. And the note and rhythm learning process for most choral directors, I think, is where we have some of our biggest missteps, because I have seen some of the best scholastic choirs in the country work up to a final performance at a convention, an ACDA or a Carnegie Hall or something like that. And the day before, or even the day of, they're still fixing notes or tuning a chord. And I'm thinking, do you think the day before that they do like a Broadway show, like the fourth performance of the week, that they're like going, okay, now remember that one time your toe is going to go a little bit over your left foot 2 more inches? Like, no, like they're running everything, making sure it goes well, but the performers have been empowered through the preparation process to be at the performance level. And my argument is that we spend the entirety of the rehearsal process from day 1 to the penultimate day before performance in the preparation phase, and we never get to the performance phase, and we never prepare our singers to be performers because we're still talking about technical issues the day of the performance. I fight this as a choir director still. I mean, it's so hard, right? Like you're sitting there and, it's like I'll work with my advanced women's choir, and I'm conducting them on the dress rehearsals. We're about to sing in like 45 minutes. Parents are about to walk in, and suddenly a chord doesn't tune in the middle of a really expressive piece. And I'm like, it's so tempting. There's like a little devil sitting on my shoulder going, oh, fix that chord, fix that chord. You can fix it. But then when we fix it, what are we doing? At that point of the process, when you fix that chord, you are sowing some doubt into the minds of every single singer that is in that group, instead of encouraging them to continue to sing with that honesty and that passion that you have worked the entire rehearsal cycle to get to. So going back to the early part of the process and the notes and the rhythms, we don't get enough feedback from our individual students of what is happening technically within their voices. That's hard, right? We don't necessarily have the bandwidth to sit there and listen to every single singer sing every phrase of every piece, right? That is not realistic. So what can we do? I have a few strategies that I can suggest based on the situation that somebody might be in. The easiest thing that you can do, and this is probably what most choir directors do, is after you've established control, after you have gotten your singers to a place where all the procedures are good and they can focus in, then you can leave the podium, you can get proximity to them, you can start listening to singers as you rehearse the whole group, right? That's an easy way to do it. Something that I learned a long time ago, we started using iPads for sheet music like a decade ago. And I remember everybody was like, wait, what are you doing? And I was like, yeah. This is like going to be the future. And people are like, no, we're not going to go away from sheet music. Like that's absolutely ridiculous. Like a presentation at a TMEA one time in like 2010, and people were like, no. And I remember talking to publishers, and they were like, we're never going to go digital. That's ridiculous. And fast forward to 2021, if we had not gone digital, we wouldn't have done things last year, like in the whole choral profession.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this digital sheet music since 2010, and pardon my sort of aside there, but we learned that it's really easy with devices in their hands to get feedback really quickly. So what I started doing was I would use the iPads, and a lot of teachers I have gotten who don't have iPads or Chromebooks or whatever to just have kids use their phones and record themselves on a passage that you've been working on. And you really want to see, like, is everybody getting this part? How is it feeling in people's voices? So I'll have everybody record that part, and then they just upload it with their name on it to a Dropbox. And it takes, I don't know, a minute of class, especially once you practice doing that procedure. They upload it, they got all their names. And then, sometime during a planning period after school, whatever, I'll sit down and I'm like, okay, let's look at that section of the handle. Let me just see. There are a few singers. We all have our list of, like, there's singers that I don't really know. Like, is little Johnny, is he getting this one part here? Or how does his voice sound? Where is he? And you'll play, Johnny's part, and you notice that Johnny, who's in 10th grade, you're like, oh my gosh, his voice, he's in a different stage of voice change. And now Johnny sounds like, for like half of the passage. Oh. You're like, oh, Johnny doesn't need to be singing tenor anymore. For this piece, Johnny really should have been singing bass the whole time. I've been doing Johnny a disservice.
Wait, pause.
Holy cow.
Okay, so pause. This is great. But now I've got to get a clarifying question. So when you do this, you've got the whole choir singing, but little Johnny's got his cell phone like right in front of his face?
Yeah. So you spread the kids out, and you have them put the microphone close to their mouth. So it picks up like 80% of them and 20% of everybody else.
That is a great idea.
You don't have to take the time to have every person sing one at a time. I mean, I used to literally have, and I do it at the beginning of the year still too. I'm in the middle of it right now with all of my choirs. I listen to all the singers, especially all the new singers. Mm-hmm. And, I'm like, let me just listen to you sing. And I just do some like vocalises and stuff. And I do that one-on-one for sure. To just make sure that I really hear their voice, and I can encourage them and do like a little bit of voice teaching, right? Because in a way, we are all teaching group voice lessons. So I'll do that, but at the same time, I am establishing a relationship with them. And so I try to make, I'll try to find some moments for levity, especially in the younger singers, and they're terrified to come in my office. And I'm always like, I promise I'm not mean. They're still just shaking. I can watch them shaking. But they come in, they sing, we laugh some. And then that's the beginning for me of the process of breaking down those barriers and removing the barriers to expression and removing the fear that I think most singers sing with.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I can see how that ability or access, I guess you could say, to feedback from the teacher at first would probably be nerve-wracking for them even to do that, to stand and hold a microphone close to their face. But once they start to realize that getting the feedback is actually less scary than having the doubt about how well they're doing. I could not do this show without the folks over at Patreon. On patreon.com/choralosophy, you can support the show and the work that I'm doing, and it's a lot of work. My goodness, this is now my second most time-consuming job, and people over at Patreon keep the lights on. They chip in at as little as $3 a month. They can do a $5 a month level. They can do a $10 a month level. They can even do some consulting level things over there where I jump on a Zoom call with you and help you solve your problems. Right, there's tons of things going on at that Patreon website, and it really does keep the mic turned on here, you might say. The producers over at Patreon are Vasquez Music Academy, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. Special thanks to all of those folks over there. So part of one of the things that's characteristic about kids and their performance anxiety in general, it comes from doubt of how it will be and how others will perceive it. And if we can desensitize kids in some way to that feedback, they start to become it's not the fear of getting it wrong kind of doesn't go away, but the part that does go away is that if I do get something wrong, I have tools to fix it. I'm empowered to fix it because I got that feedback. Is that what you see happening?
Yes, absolutely. And it's a long process, and it begins at a very simple level, very small things. So like in my warm-ups, for example, I do at some point in the warm-up process, I have people make crazy sounds. And so I'll just be like, all right, Chris, crazy sound. You make a crazy sound. And then everybody goes, and then I'll pick on the older kids first, and let them set an example and let other kids see like, oh, we can make sounds and it's okay. Then I'll start picking on the younger kids, and they'll start to do it. And at first, some of them will be like, like they'll barely phonate, and everybody goes, like they laugh, but they're like, okay, well, maybe I can make more of a sound and I don't say anything. I just let it naturally happen. And over the course of weeks and months, I'll do crazy sounds almost every single day because it's so easy to just do it. And over time, kids start to get really bold. They not only get less scared of making sound, so phonating, but then they're like, oh, well, I can do anything with my voice. And I mean, exploration of the vocal mechanism is tremendously important for our younger singers. So I'll do that. And that's just an example of something very early on and very simple that I work into. And it takes like 30 seconds of the choral rehearsal.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. I'll have to steal that one as well. In fact, I'm glad you brought up warm-ups because on my Patreon page, my members are they know who's coming on my show ahead of time, so they can drop questions if they want. And I had somebody drop a question for you here on warm-ups on this topic. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this. This is from Stephen Curry on my Patreon. He said that my high schoolers tend to miss the air quotes fun warm-ups and the canons that they would do in junior high because I tend to stick to stretches, breath and body connection, resonance, warm-ups for the high schoolers. And so what are some ways that you incorporate fun and exciting and invigorating into your warm-ups?
Yeah, that's interesting that he mentions the junior high because our junior high choir also does, more of the, I guess, just voice building, canon type thing. And, I find for my purposes, a lot of those warm-ups aren't super effective. And so I don't do them, but I want the singers to have fun.
Right.
So like one of my attention getters at the beginning of a rehearsal, I'm very against yelling or raising your voice, or I really actually don't even love the like clap and people clap the rhythm back because I want them to watch me. I want their attention on me, and that needs to be the habit. So I'll stand up on the podium and I'll start to make a gesture, and then they have to mirror it. And I do ridiculous gestures when I do attention getting. Like I'll get their attention, and I mean, I'll do a pig nose, and I'll do like jazz hands and whatever, wacky inflatable float, arm man. Like I'll do all these things that not only they have fun with that, but it frees them up. Again, I'm breaking down these barriers all the time, consistently through everything I'm doing. So that's the very beginning of the rehearsal. The very beginning of the rehearsal is taking whatever has happened in their day, which let's be honest, like kids have a lot of challenges in their lives. And, we want them to come into choir and just be ready to sing because, hey, we're professionals. Like this is what we do. This is our job. They're teenagers or pre-teenagers or college students. I mean, they have a lot going on. And even if they're adults, even if it's a community choir, they're leaving a stressful job or whatever and coming to escape during this time. So I always do a lot of physical things at the beginning to sort of like loosen them up, and they have a lot of fun with that. But then I do games. So like one of the games that we play, and we'll do this once a week. We call it name it then. And that's only because somebody said, well, name it then one time we were playing it. It's basically name that tune, but with Spotify. And I have a playlist of a bunch of really popular songs, and they say, oh, I can name it in four notes, which is just a note as a second, and I'll do that. And they love getting into that. And then you can like add to where they have to like, you'll stop it randomly. And if they get it, then they keep going. And then they have to like, I'll stop it and they have to sing the next line, which is another game show. I'm like combining multiple game shows together. But they love stuff like that. And I do that like once a week for like 5 to 10 minutes. maybe on a Friday at the end of class, or like on a Wednesday morning, or sometime when I know that they need a little bit of an uplifting thing. I also do it for community building, because part of that fear of singing out is the fear of singing in front of their peers. That's the most terrifying thing you could possibly tell someone to do. And so by building the community and letting them have more fun together and build those relationships, I'm not just wasting time by playing a game once or twice a week. I'm consciously making an effort to community build. So I do fun things like that, but I don't do silly warm-ups that aren't pedagogically sound and don't serve a pedagogical goal for what I have for the singers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it sounds like what you're describing is that through your warm-ups and then through your classroom culture throughout the class, you're trying to make the idea of making vocal noises so normal and so natural that it would be like at some point, it sounds like your goal would be that if a singer in my class feels odd trying to make a vocal noise, that's like a fish feeling weird that they're wet. It should become so normal in your classroom that if I can make weird noises like whoa in front of all my friends, then I could also try to sing an ah vowel on a D natural, and that would also be not that weird. Is that kind of what you're going for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to tell myself, oh, but they don't, my singers are all singing. Like, look, the choir sounds good. I mean, we look at the end product so often. We're like, I mean, my choir got a 1 at festival. They always, they got a 1 in sight reading. They got a 1 in performance. We're crushing it. But then I'll listen to those individual recordings. I'll go back and I'll be like, okay, let me just see. And then I think, oh my goodness, like we've somehow managed to create that. And half of the singers are barely phonating. And I mean, with the younger singers, but you'd be surprised, even some of the advanced high school ensembles I've worked with, people will find ways to do the least amount possible, unless it is forced of them to do more. And I don't say that in a way to be critical. I just say that as an observation. Especially with teenagers.
Okay. I criticize choir directors on their show all the time. That's kind of what the show is. It's okay. We have to have thick skin.
Yeah. I mean, I one of the things I always say is I'm my own biggest critic. Yeah. I mean, if something in my classroom doesn't go well, I immediately assume, it's probably my fault. And I find that's not always everyone's response when something goes well. A choir rehearsal end will be like, man, they were really unfocused today. Or gosh, they couldn't sing that at all.
Right.
I mean, so many responses like that. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. It's probably your fault if your rehearsal didn't go well.
Yep.
Just saying, and that's a tough pill to swallow, even for me, but that will be my default when something doesn't go well. I'm like, okay, what did I do? What didn't go well? What could I have done differently? And that level of focus and self-criticism, not in a negative way. I mean, I'm not beating myself up over it.
Yep.
I don't like bad rehearsals. So I'm like, every day, little microscopic gains add up and become part of, the successful process that we have, moving forward. So consistent learning,
Yeah. I'm the only one in my classroom that has the power to change the overall culture for the day. One student can't do it by themselves. It has to be me. I'm in the position of authority. And so you're right. That is the right way to look at it. In fact, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. You brought up the idea of getting a 1 at festival and how for a lot of directors, that is their end all beat all. That is the goal. That is how also they evaluate their own success. In other words, I am doing well because my kids get a 1. And then to bring that into this topic that we're talking about of, singing with honest emotional expression and a truly moving experience. What if it became our paradigm was that you don't get a 1 at festival unless you've moved someone? Like, what if we were to figure out a way? Now, first of all, one of my criticisms is I'm not a fan of festivals and ratings at all. I would prefer to not do them at all. But if we did, what if you could only get a 1 by making the judges cry? How would that change our goals in the classroom? How would it change our self-evaluation as teachers? Would we stop accepting, well, they sang all the notes and rhythms right, so we're done? Maybe that would change that paradigm.
Yeah, I am with you. I have not done our choral festival in a few years. And it's been hard because I want to set a good example in the choral community that I'm in. I want to be supportive of the organizations running the festivals. And I mean, I have been in a lot of ways. I mean, I've even like run the choral festivals, like I've been the chair, we've all had that time where you're asked to be the volunteer chairperson for festival or, all state or whatever it is. And I've done all that. And I think for me, when you put that much time and effort into something and you look at what it's designed to do and it's not helping your students, then there's a problem. And so I think back a few years ago, we had a choral festival and we were singing an Eastern European piece. And this was, it was probably like 2013. So like, it was before like everyone and their uncle was singing an Eastern European piece. So, and this was specifically, I think, a Bulgarian piece. So they sing, with a really forward nasal tone. And we had just sung 2 other more traditional pieces. And I got a page and a half long lecture from one of the clinicians about how I was ruining my girls' voices. And that just did not settle well with me at all. And it got me thinking. I look back at all my sheets for the past few years. I'm like, the only person that gets feedback from choral festival is the directors. Yeah. So it's really just like 3 months of work for a little bit of PD for ourselves. And let's be honest, sometimes somebody will say something and I'm like, that's a really insightful point. Great. But 99% of the feedback, it's like, yeah, I know that they really can't sing that. Yeah, I'm aware that that's a problem. You sit there and you nod as you read the comments. You're like, yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm a big advocate. If you're going to do a choral festival, it needs to have live clinics, that need to be a part of what they're doing.
Yep.
But here's another like issue that I have with those live clinics. They're usually 10-ish minutes long. So as a clinician, I've done adjudications and I've done these clinics. You basically get to pick one part in one piece and you just try to fix it in quotes, oh, that chord was out of tune. Let me see if I can fix it. Or that rhythm never locked. Let me see if I can fix that rhythm. What an interesting creation we have made here with this whole process. Mm-hmm. That's what we're teaching our students, matters. Not that we don't want them to learn how to read rhythms and sing the correct notes and to execute well. Those are important things. But more than that, are we cultivating lifelong singers that are going to love choral music and are going to make it a part of what they do and a part of who they are? Mm-hmm. And if we are, then we need to, of course, do the parts at the beginning. The technical things need to be the base layer that we build upon with the rest of it. And again, going back to our conversation at the beginning, we spend 99% of our rehearsal process on that base layer. I'm just like, most people might listen to that. And I mean, I think I would even listen to myself say that and be like, no, I don't do that, But if we had like Maury Povich and he went and looked at the lie detector test and he like measured the minutes for every single minute of your choir rehearsal. And he's like, well, the lie detector shows that you talked about tuning a chord in the dress rehearsal the day of the concert, it's a problem. And that we've created these systems like a choral festival and even a choral festival with a clinic. We've set up systems to reinforce that it's really about execution of these musical aspects, that's what choir is. And that deserves, in my mind, some heavy scrutiny and potentially, reworking as a profession.
Yeah. And I think if you are stressed about fixing a note or a rhythm or fixing a chord that isn't tuning on the day of the concert or right before the concert, there's a really good likelihood that you over-programmed for that concert, and that's also your fault.
Yes.
So because ultimately you're right, we want to spend those final moments with our singers, getting them to a place where they feel comfortable so that they can go out and have a good performance. And having the last moments that they have with you right before the audience comes in, you're still telling them all the mistakes they're making, then what you're doing is you're actually doing the opposite of that. You're making it so that they then walk out into the room when the audience is there, and spinning in their mind are all the things that might go wrong. And at that point, and I'm guilty of it too, I've done it before many times. And you're right. It's really, really hard to break that habit. But I think so. There's a programming aspect of it, but also, you've used the example now a couple of times of fixing that or tuning a chord right before the performance. One of the things that I find that is a helpful thing to do in those situations is, let's say that there's again that G major chord and it's just not tuning, and the concert's right now. I might say things nowadays because I've learned my lesson, where I will ask them to go back and sing that section again, but I'm not going to mention that the chord is not in tune. I might trick them. I might say things like, we're going to go and we're going to stop right on the G major chord, and I want us to just stop and listen, and I want us to feel what we should be feeling at that moment, and just hold it until I tell you to stop holding it. I haven't told them that it was wrong, but in 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, just by getting them to focus and listen in that moment, they will fix it anyway. Because they do. Kids can hear if it's in tune or out of tune. Sometimes they just have to be told. But what I'm trying to avoid doing is I'm trying to avoid making it about, because you were wrong, now we will go back and fix it. Right? That's right. The day of the concert is not for that.
Well, and they know, you made a point, like they hear that it's out of tune, especially a more advanced ensemble will perceive more of the issues. That's where in my warm-up process, I do a lot of visual reinforcement so that we can create a language, a nonverbal language that I can use when I'm directing them. And if it is a vowel unification issue that's causing the chord to not be in tune, I'll just show them a vowel shape when we get to it. Let's do it again. Watch me closely, or whatever it is. And then they sing it with a better vowel. If it's a balance issue, then I'll say, let's do that again. 20% more sound from the alto twos. And, right. Like you can tell them the thing to do without going, chord's out of tune. I mean, that has been me so many times. And that has been directors that I've watched so many times. They get emotional because you're frustrated. And then everybody reads that energy, and those mirror neurons kick in, and it's not good for breaking the fourth wall, the day of the performance or whatever it is. So there are ways to fix that. And I'm not saying, anyone that has heard my ensembles will know that I'm not saying that you need to cut corners or that you need to ignore when things aren't technically being done well.
Yeah.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that there are ways to approach it earlier, and developing the skill set and the communication tools with your ensemble to fix those things quickly.
Yeah.
I talk about front loading warm-ups. It's another topic that I have presented on before. And I mean, front-loaded warm-ups, at the beginning of the school year, I might spend 20 to 30 minutes of a rehearsal on warm-ups, establishing what it is that we do and all of these tools, verbally, non-verbally, that ways that we're going to communicate and fix things in real time, and teaching them the whys and the hows instead of just the whats. We spend so much of our time as directors on the whats, sing that note higher, do that vowel taller, and we don't explain the concept of like, here are the ways here are the reasons that things can be out of tune. Here are the things that you need to do. Today we had like 9 suspensions in a song in my advanced women's choir. And I stopped each time and I said, after I explained for like a minute and a half what a suspension was and how like one note has to be sung with a little up arrow on it, and the bottom note, let's put a down arrow on it. And then we have to like lean into the note. So then we have to make sure we can hear both of them. And we talked through all of it. And then we did it in a really specific fashion. And then it came again. I was like, well, wait, what just happened? And they were like, oh, suspension. And I was like, yes. So do the things we practiced. And we went back and do it again. And then, of course, by like the 9th time it happened, they're just executing. I mean, that's just one day and one example. But we as choir directors need to think so much more about empowering students to have the tools that they need to be successful, instead of just shoving the what's, at them.
Right. Yeah. A way I think about that concept is and again, I'm not perfect at it. Like you've been saying too, I agree. Some of these things are really hard habits to shake out. But what I try to do is I try to give as high of a percentage. I would love to go for 100% of positive feedback only versus negative feedback. Now, this is a concept that I explained to the kids right at the beginning of the school year, is when I say positive feedback, I don't mean only compliments. I mean things to do. I want to give them instructions of things to do. And I want to try to avoid language where I'm telling them things to not do. That don't sing it that way. That's negative feedback, instead of giving them a concrete thing to do. Like, try to sing it this way, and then show them or demonstrate or whatever, because it's psychologically very, very important that feedback is positive in the sense of, here's a thing I can try, because then they actually have a tool. Because I remember one time I was singing for a director that I will not name, and I was singing a solo. And there's actually the incipit in the Bibel Ave Maria. I was singing the chant opening, and I would sing it, and then he would stop. And the response in the rehearsal was, "Could you just do it a little bit more?" And I was like, sure. But I was really scared, and there was a lot of people in the room, and I was like, I didn't want to sound stupid. I was probably 22, and so I just tried something. Like, I have no idea what I was trying. I think the first time I just sang a little louder. And he stopped again. He stopped again, and he was like, "Well, it just needs to be a little bit more, just a little bit more." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so then I'm trying to do, like, he was giving me nothing. And of course, each time I did it, I'm getting more and more nervous, more and more scared, probably less and less expressive every single time that I was getting that kind of a feedback. So I've always remembered that. As like, if I'm going to give the kid a feedback or the singer a feedback, I want it to be as concrete, like, can you try this?
Yeah, that is such a great point. And, feedback should be actionable. It should be positive. So not like, you sound great. It should be, here's what you should do. Here, do this, not don't do that. And it needs to be brief. People stop listening after like 3 words. So the rule I learned in grad school was 7 words or less. The rule of 7 words or less, and that is tremendously powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take you down one more slight tangent before we go today. Back when you first signed on with me today, one of the very first things you mentioned is, because I know you do a program that has kind of a mixture between a cappella programs and what we could call, air quotes, traditional choral repertoire. And you mentioned, and I've been saving this for the end, but you mentioned that when your kids do pop music and arrangements of pop songs, it's more culturally native to them. And so they oftentimes can sing more expressively right away. And then if you did Bach, maybe it would take a little bit more work. And I want to drill in on that concept for just a few minutes, because it seems to me like one of the things that we take for granted is that a lot of our ability to be open and free and authentic with each other when we sing or when we just talk is we have a certain sense of safety in our environment, and that a lot of that comes from culture. So if we are culturally comfortable with the music when we walk into the classroom, that's just one less barrier that we have to knock down in order to get to that sense of authenticity. And so my question, really, just to see if you can reflect on this, is what do you notice that you can get there to that level of comfort with other types of music, or more, I guess, more culturally foreign types of music, but it's just that it takes more time to break down the barriers? Is that how you would think of it?
Yeah, you definitely can. It just sometimes takes a lot more work. And I would start by asking myself, like, what assumptions am I making about their prior knowledge and experience
Yes.
that would make them successful at this piece? And, I remember last year I started making lessons like with music theory and history and all these things because I did them during the quarantine when everybody was at home virtual learning. And then I started making more of them and selling them to other choir directors in the fall. And I started using them in my classroom, like that kind of concept. Like, oh, let's tell them, like, we did a Vivaldi piece, and so I had a lesson on Vivaldi, and we spent a week on Vivaldi and Baroque music and the culture, and we talked about Venice and the girls' orphanages, and even like some interesting things about what that even meant at the time, and they find that stuff fascinating. They're like, oh, this isn't just like something that lives in like an old person's book. This was like, these are real people that lived. And you give them context to understand it culturally. You give them context to understand it musically, and play more Baroque music. I last year, taught for the first time ever in my career, taught my kids the timeline of Western music history, and that they now we can listen to a piece now, and I'll be like, what period do you think this is from? And they'll be like, I think it's romantic, and they'll be like, yeah, it does, it's got those harmonies and whatever, it sounds more like. I've taught them why those things exist, and given them some background to understand those things better. What else do we assume? Well, we assume that, like, well, they've heard this music before. Okay, well, they probably haven't heard Baroque. So if I'm going to sing a Bach, which I mean, I may have done Bach one time with my high school students. It's not because I don't love Bach. I love Bach. But the number of barriers between them and success in Bach are just numerous, right?
Yeah.
The language, the language is a challenge. A lot of them can barely sing in English, like, so the language is a challenge. The tessitura is a challenge. I mean, a lot of Bach pieces, I live in the break.
Yep.
Just live in the break.
Yes,
and a lot of
murder
music.
for the tenors. It's
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And so, looking at that, and then like just the musical material, it sounds so different than music that they know and music that they've heard their whole life. Like, why does everybody have a different melody at a different time? That makes no sense to me. And so you have to teach them about layers. You have to teach them about like counterpoint and a subject and an answer and a counter subject. I mean, there is so much to unpack in just an average Baroque piece of music that when you step back and you analyze it, you go, oh my gosh, well, no wonder they can't sing it with energy and passion. No wonder that we can't do a convincing performance of that Baroque piece. There's just too many barriers in the way. And I saw that, through contemporary a cappella. I also saw that through directing musicals, which is something I think a lot of like high school choir directors end up doing as a part of their job. When they're going out on stage and they're talking about breaking the fourth wall and, can you hear the people sing? Like we were doing Les Mis, and they're out on stage and they're acting and they're singing their heart out. They haven't looked at the notes for can you hear the people sing in months.
Yeah.
We learned that 3 months ago. And it was just eye-opening to me. I was like, wait a minute. And good luck fixing something by then. Like, you're not going to fix a harmony here. So the other element of that I think was really informative to me as a choir director is I don't have control. My a cappella groups, a musical, those avenues, when they're performing, I'm just sitting there. I'm at the soundboard or I'm backstage. And I'm like, I hope it goes well. If they start to get off tempo, but I can't fix it. I can't wave my arms. I can't do something. And we're such control freaks. I'm generalizing. I still am. But that's why it's good for me. It's like it's like eating my vegetables, right? Like I every day am thinking, how do I empower, for instance, my contemporary a cappella group? How do I empower them with the tools to sing this without me? Because every single performance that they have all year will be without me in front of them. And that perspective has changed the way that I approach all of my traditional choir directing.
That's fantastic. Those are some great thoughts. And I think there's also some aspects of that conductorless performance that any choir should experience at some point during, it doesn't have to be an a cappella group, but getting them on stage, knowing that you're not going to come save them, is a very valuable experience. And I've found that I can even do it with the right piece. I can even do it with my choir of 100. We did it last year with masks and social distancing, and we were so spread out that I just decided I'm getting in the way. It's like marching band. I'm so far away. I can't keep the choir together. So I just let them do it. And they're amazed. It's amazing how much they can do it. So those are all really good thoughts. On the way out, I know you also do some composing, arranging, and other types of things. And I'm going to put a link to your website in the show notes for folks to learn more about you and find some of those things. But could you give us a quick little plug? Like, what are some things we'd find on jdfrizzell.com?
Sure. So I do have a number of compositions for various levels of difficulty, and they've all been things that I've written for ensembles that I'm either in or working with. So they're written from a choir director's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I always call them like singers' pieces. I also have a number of online resources that I came up with during the quarantine, and also last year during like hybrid and online. I mean, we all probably did this. I had kids on a screen. I had kids in my ear. I had kids in front of me. I had kids, in and out of the classroom. I had ensembles split into 2 or 3 groups. And so I created some pieces and some lessons to help facilitate that process more easily. And in fact, basically I'm making them as cheap as possible just to facilitate like the credit card fees and the web hosting.
Mm-hmm.
I just did it like this week because we got a mask mandate a week ago, and I was like, okay, this is a new world. Like, we've got to go back and we've got to do this again. And I thought, man, if I'm feeling this level of anxiety, I'm sure a lot of other people are in the same boat. So feel free to check those out. There are a lot of things that I've designed as an educator for other educators to hopefully help with that.
Awesome. That's great. Sounds like awesome stuff. And I appreciate you spending some time with me during your, what are you on your plan period right now?
This was lunch/planning.
Oh, okay.
So it was an enjoyable lunch/planning.
Yeah, for sure.
Anytime.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Chris. You too.
Bye. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I hope you got something out of that. I sure enjoyed that conversation. And like I said at the beginning, I'm going to borrow so many things from JD in this talk. So if you enjoyed it, like, share, tell your friends, comment on things, leave ratings in podcast apps, join the Patreon, use the promo code at Sight Reading Factory, at My Music Folders, at Graphite, at Ryan Main. Anything that you can do to interact with the show helps me actually keep the show going. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.